You might think you know where this story is headed, but trust me, you have no idea. The answers I found led me into a game I wasn't prepared for. And the person she was seeing? Well, let's just say that when I found out, everything changed. Forever. It was an ordinary evening, or at least I thought it was. I came home from work, dropped my bag by the door, and found her sitting on the couch, flipping through some magazine. Nothing seemed off. But as I glanced over, I noticed how different she looked, the way she smiled without really smiling. A forced gesture, like a mask. Her usual warmth had turned to something colder, more calculated. I shrugged it off at first. Just another stressful day at work, I figured. But as the days went on, I started noticing the small things. The way she hid her phone when I entered the room. The casual brushing off of my attempts at conversation. She would spend longer hours at the office, often telling me she had just one more meeting, or it's a late-night project. The worst part? She seemed to be always gone when I needed her most. There were moments when I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe she was just busy at work, but deep down, I could feel it. Something was wrong. The silence between us was growing. Then there was the way she reacted to the smallest things. When I asked her about her day, she'd give me a vague answer and quickly change the subject. It wasn't like her. She always shared details, but now, it was like pulling teeth. But what really started gnawing at me was the phone. The way she constantly checked it, almost nervously. At first, I chalked it up to her being busy, but when I found out she had turned off the screen when I came close, something inside me snapped. I wish I had trusted my gut back then, but I didn't. Instead, I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking things. After all, we'd been married for 8 years. We had 2 kids. There was no reason to doubt her. But then, one night, it happened. She left her phone on the counter, the screen lit up. I shouldn't have checked. I knew I shouldn't have, but I did. And that's when I saw it. A message. Just one line, but it was enough to make my heart drop. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. And underneath that message, a name. A name I didn't recognize. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Who was this guy? I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing as my mind spun, coming up with 1,000 scenarios. I quickly put the phone down, pretending nothing had happened. But in that moment, I knew. Something had shifted. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed to know more. So I waited. But the questions didn't stop. And soon, neither would the lies. Who was she seeing? And why did it feel like my world was about to shatter? The days that followed were a blur. I kept replaying that moment in my head over and over again. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. What did that even mean? Who was this guy? I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. Every time I looked at her, I wondered if she was thinking of him. Every word she said felt like a lie. She was too calm, too collected. She smiled when I walked into the room, but I knew it wasn't the same smile she used to give me. Something was different, something had shifted, and I was left standing in the ruins of what used to be our life. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake in the dark, wondering if it was already too late. If everything was already slipping through my fingers, and I hadn't even noticed. I kept asking myself the same questions. Was I just being paranoid? Maybe it was nothing. But the message, the strange name, it wouldn't let me go. The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I knew I couldn't just ask her. She'd lie, of course. But I had to know. I started with the basics, her email. I felt dirty for doing it, but I knew it was the only way. Her inbox was full of notifications, most from a name I didn't recognize. Some emails were even about personal plans, things she hadn't told me about. The last one was the kicker. It was an invitation to a private event with a note that said, "Can't wait to see you again. It's been too long." I felt my chest tighten as I stared at the screen. That was it. The proof I needed, all right there in front of me. But the name was still missing. I knew I had to confront her soon, but I didn't want to rush it. If I confronted her now, she'd just deny everything and the whole thing would get swept under the rug. I needed more evidence, something solid that couldn't be ignored. And so, I did the one thing I never thought I'd do. I started to follow her. Not in a creepy, stalker way, but enough to see where she went when she worked late or made those strange phone calls. One evening, I saw her leave the house at the usual time. I followed at a distance, keeping my car a few blocks behind. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but I had to know. And I wasn't going to stop until I found something concrete. After about 10 minutes, I saw her turn into a parking lot that I didn't recognize. I parked around the corner, watching. She got out of the car and walked toward a building. My heart pounded in my chest. I didn't move for a long time, just sat there in the dark, frozen. Then I saw him. The guy from the pictures. The one who was so familiar in the messages, the one she was always texting. He walked out of the building, smiled at her, and they shared a quick hug. He pulled her closer for a second, whispering something in her ear. And then, they kissed. It wasn't just a friendly peck. It was a kiss. A kiss that said everything I needed to know. I couldn't breathe. My stomach churned. I was too angry to even feel hurt, just rage. She was cheating on me. With him. As I drove back home, the weight of it all settled in. I could barely think, my mind clouded with thoughts of what I'd just witnessed. But the worst part wasn't that she was cheating, it was that I didn't even know who he was yet. She had kept him hidden so well, like he was some kind of shadow. Now, I had the truth. But I still didn't know his name. I couldn't let her off the hook yet. Not when I was so close. The days after I followed her were agonizing. I kept seeing her smile, hearing her voice, and all I could think about was the image of her with him. The kiss. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, but I still didn't know who he was. I needed to find his name. His identity. Something solid. I couldn't let it go. I spent the next few days obsessing over the details, trying to catch her slipping. I scoured her social media, looking for more signs of him. The pictures of her with that guy, the one who seemed to always be in the background, arms around her, lingering too close. His hand on her back. It was clear this wasn't some random fling, it was something serious. I couldn't confront her yet. She'd deny everything, and I needed more than suspicions to back me up. I had to dig deeper. Then, one day, I found a business card in her purse while she was in the shower. It was for a sports agent firm I hadn't heard of. His card. My heart raced as I looked at the name, Chris Foster. I punched the name into my phone and searched. Nothing. It was frustrating, just an address and a phone number. I wasn't going to give up that easily. I called the number the next day. A woman answered. Sports Elite Agency, how can I help you? I swallowed hard, trying to sound casual. Hi, I'm looking for Chris Foster. Is he available? The woman hesitated before responding. He's out of the office. Can I take a message? I could barely keep my cool. No, that's okay. I'll try again later. I hung up, my mind racing. Chris Foster. The name was burned into my memory. That night, I dug deeper. I found a picture of him, a professional basketball player. A pro athlete. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just seeing some random guy. It was a professional basketball player. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed it? I couldn't breathe. My thoughts were spiraling. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more answers. I couldn't act on impulse. Not yet. I watched her the next morning, trying to look normal. She had no idea what I knew. But I was running out of time. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't keep living in the unknown anymore. Every day, the weight of the secret she was keeping crushed me. Chris Foster. The man she'd been seeing behind my back. A professional basketball player. I had the facts now, and it was all I could think about. But despite having the evidence, I wasn't ready to confront her. I needed to understand more. I needed to know how long this had been going on, what he meant to her, and if I was truly just a fool in her eyes. I started digging deeper, making calls to some of her colleagues. Casual conversations, trying to gauge if anyone knew about her late nights or her relationship with Chris. One of her co-workers let slip. I know she's been distracted, but it's that basketball player. I think they're serious. He's been in town a lot recently. That hit me like a brick. It wasn't just a fling. This was a full-blown relationship, and I wasn't even part of her world anymore. I was the background noise. It was time to confront her. She was in the kitchen, humming to herself as if nothing had changed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her. She had no idea what I knew. She didn't know that I was holding the truth in my hands. Who is Chris Foster? I asked, my voice calm but edged with an intensity one couldn't suppress. She froze. Her eyes darted away from me, and I could see the panic rising in her. She turned slowly, trying to mask the shock. Chris is just a guy from work, she said, her voice shaky, but she couldn't mask the lie. I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. A guy from work? Funny, because I just found out he's a professional basketball player. You hang out with him in your free time? Her face drained of color. She hesitated, then said, It's not what you think. I shook my head. No more lies. I've seen the texts, the photos, the messages. I know you've been seeing him. She took a step back, her lips trembling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I wanted to scream, but instead, I simply stood there, cold and composed. It just happened. You've been lying to me for months, and now you want me to believe it's nothing? She took a few steps forward, her voice breaking. Please, just let me explain. I don't want to lose you. But I had no more patience. I turned my back to her. You already lost me. I didn't wait for her to respond. I couldn't. The damage was done. The next few days were a blur of silence. I couldn't look at her without feeling a mix of rage and betrayal. Chris Foster. The name echoed in my mind constantly, like a cruel reminder that everything I thought I knew about our life together had been a lie. I wanted answers, but I didn't know if I could handle any more of the truth. She tried to reach out, of course. Texts, calls. She even came to me, tearful, apologizing for everything, saying she didn't want to lose me. But I couldn't hear it. The words meant nothing now. She had already lost me. I stayed distant, avoiding her attempts to explain, refusing to look into her eyes as she pleaded for forgiveness. It wasn't about the apology. It was about the fact that she'd crossed a line I couldn't unsee. Every time she tried to talk, I felt like I was sinking deeper into a pit, and every word she spoke just felt more hollow. That weekend, she left the house for a few hours. I didn't know where she was going, and honestly, I didn't care. But I wasn't done. I still had questions. I had her phone, not out of some twisted sense of revenge, but because I needed more answers. So, I went through her messages again. It wasn't hard to find the conversation with Chris. There they were, messages full of flirty, intimate words. Can't wait to be with you again. I miss you so much. The ones that caught my eye, though, were the ones about our life. I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret from him, she had texted. He's getting suspicious. What do we do if he finds out? Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought I was the only one who had been suspicious. I thought I had been imagining things. But she was worried. She knew what I had figured out. And yet, she didn't stop. But there was something else. One final message stood out. Don't worry, Chris replied. We'll figure it out. This thing between us is real. I'll be here, no matter what. I felt sick. Real? Was that what this was to her? Something real? When she came home, I couldn't keep the rage inside anymore. I stood in front of her, my fists clenched, every inch of me ready to explode. So what now? I spat. You keep seeing him? You keep lying to me, to us? Do you think this is something you can fix? She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. She looked lost, like she wasn't sure who she was anymore, or maybe who I was now. You don't get it, she whispered, her eyes red. I never meant for it to happen like this. I love you, but I love him too. I blinked in disbelief. She loved him. She loved him. In that moment, something inside me cracked. The man she had fallen for wasn't the one standing before her anymore. The man she had betrayed, who had tried to save their marriage, wasn't here. All I could feel was emptiness. I'm done, I said, my voice steady but breaking on the inside. It's over. She didn't argue. She didn't even try to change my mind. She knew it was true. And so did I. After I said it, after the words left my mouth, the silence that followed felt suffocating. She didn't try to stop me, didn't beg me to change my mind. It was like she knew, deep down, that nothing could undo what had been done. The betrayal was too deep. I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't stay in the house with her. I couldn't look at her, not after everything I had uncovered. So, I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and left without saying another word. I drove around aimlessly, not caring where I went, just needing space. I went to a hotel that night, unsure of what to do next. The weight of the situation hung over me. I didn't feel anger anymore. It was more like numbness had taken over. I had all the evidence I needed, but somehow, it still didn't feel real. How could she do this to me? For the first time in years, I had no idea what my next step should be. The next day, I woke up with the same feeling of emptiness. I didn't want to go home, but I didn't want to stay in this cold, sterile hotel room either. I thought about calling a friend or family, but I couldn't bring myself to talk about it yet. I wasn't ready to explain everything, to relive the hurt in front of someone else. It was easier to keep it all inside, easier to bury it deep, and pretend I wasn't falling apart. I stayed in the hotel for a few days, trying to clear my head. But every night, I kept coming back to one thought. How did it happen? Was she always like this? Had I missed the signs? Had I been so blinded by love that I never saw the cracks? Eventually, I knew I couldn't hide from the truth forever. I couldn't run away from the mess she'd created. I had to go home. When I finally walked through the door again, it was like stepping into a different world. She was there, sitting in the living room, her eyes swollen from crying. But I didn't care. She wasn't the person I thought she was anymore. I had to remind myself of that. I wasn't walking back into the home I once knew. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity before she spoke, her voice soft. "I'm sorry for everything." I didn't respond. I just stared at her. Sorry wasn't enough. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. She had made her choice. I didn't know what the future held for us. I didn't know what my life would look like without her. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. "I think it's time we make it official," I said, my voice cold. "I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore." Her eyes welled up again, but I couldn't afford to be moved. The damage was done. And the worst part? She had already moved on. I left that night, not knowing where I was going, but sure that I was finally walking away from the wreckage of a marriage I once cherished. I woke up the next morning in a place I didn't recognize, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. Not in a celebratory way, but in a way that told me I had taken the first step toward taking my life back. I didn't have any answers. I didn't know what the future looked like, but I was sure of one thing. I wasn't going to let this define me. I had spent so much time consumed by the lies, the cheating, and the betrayal that I forgot who I was without her. I stayed in the hotel for a few more nights. I didn't rush home. I didn't want to go back to the place that held so many memories, both good and bad. It felt like walking through a haunted house of my past, and I needed a clean break. But the hardest part? The quiet. The absence of her presence, the absence of her laughter. It felt hollow, like someone had ripped a piece of me out and left me to figure out how to survive without it. I couldn't help but wonder, who was I now? I spent those days reflecting, thinking about the kind of man I wanted to be moving forward. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming my life, my peace, and my happiness. I was so caught up in trying to save a relationship that was already broken, I forgot what it meant to take care of myself. By the end of the week, I felt ready to return home. I needed to face the mess I had left behind, but more importantly, I needed to take control of my future. When I finally walked through the front door, I wasn't sure what I expected. She was gone. The house felt emptier than I could have imagined. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It was a place filled with memories of someone who no longer existed. I sat down on the couch, looking around at the familiar surroundings. Everything had changed. I had changed. The person I was before, strong, trusting, and hopeful, was gone. I didn't know if I could ever trust like I did before, but I was willing to try. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen, then deleted her number. It felt final. There was no going back. In that moment, I realized that while I couldn't undo the past, I could shape my future. I could choose how this ended. I wouldn't let her betrayal break me. The hardest part of this whole experience wasn't the cheating. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the pain. It was the fact that she had moved on so easily. I spent weeks lost in the heartbreak, but for her, it was like I was just another chapter she had closed. That hurt more than anything. But in time, I would heal. It's strange how much can change in a short amount of time. One moment, you're living a life you thought you understood, and the next, you're standing on the edge of something new, unsure of where you're headed, but knowing you can't stay where you were. The first few days after I left felt like a blur. The silence. I was used to noise, her laughter, our conversations, the bustle of a life we had built together. But now, it was just stillness. I couldn't escape it, no matter how many distractions I tried to put in place. I filled my days with work, with gym sessions, with trying to pretend everything was fine. But there were moments, quiet moments, when the weight of it all hit me again. It wasn't even the affair that got to me. I had already processed that she'd betrayed me. No, what hit me the hardest was realizing how deeply I had been deceived, how easily she had moved on, while I was still trying to pick up the pieces. I thought I was done feeling sorry for myself, but some nights, it would hit me like a wave, and I'd find myself wondering what went wrong. Was I not enough? Did I miss all the signs? But then I remembered something. It wasn't me. It was her choice. She chose to betray me, and I couldn't spend my life questioning myself because of her mistakes. I started focusing on myself. For the first time in a long while, I began doing things just for me. I picked up hobbies I had long forgotten. I started running in the mornings, something I used to love before life got in the way. and I joined a new group of friends, people who had no idea who I was before, no baggage, no old wounds. Just me. I realized, slowly but surely, that I had been so wrapped up in saving a marriage that wasn't meant to be saved, that I had forgotten to care about the one person who truly mattered, me. I threw myself into my work, into rebuilding my life from the ground up. I took pride in little victories, getting through a day without thinking about her, fixing things around the house that I had neglected for too long, reconnecting with old friends, and even laughing again. But the biggest change came when I decided to take a step I hadn't considered before. I thought about moving, not just to another city, but to a fresh environment, a place where I could truly leave the past behind. The thought of it excited me. It felt like the closure I needed, a way to put an official end to that chapter of my life. I started looking at places, thinking about where I wanted to be next. And then, one day, as I was signing a lease on a new apartment, I had an epiphany. This was my life. My choice. I had the power to decide what came next. The future wasn't something to fear. It was something to create. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to do just that. But even as I looked forward, the question lingered. What would I do if she ever came back? If she wanted another chance? Months had passed since I moved into my new apartment. I was finally starting to feel like myself again. I'd filled my days with work, new routines, and a peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't that I'd forgotten what happened, but I had learned to live with it. I wasn't angry anymore, just focused on rebuilding. I was healing. Then one evening, I stopped by my favorite coffee shop on the way home, a quiet little place I had come to love. I had just ordered my coffee when I saw her. She was standing at the counter, her back to me. At first, I didn't recognize her. Her hair was shorter, and she was dressed more casually than I remembered. But the moment I saw her, my heart skipped. It was her. I froze, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to turn around and leave, to avoid this moment altogether. I had worked so hard to move past everything. But another part of me, some deep part one didn't fully understand, made me stay. I walked up to the counter, keeping my distance. I pretended I hadn't seen her, but then I heard her voice behind me. "Hey," she said, a little hesitant. I turned around slowly. She looked exactly like I remembered, and yet, she seemed different. Vulnerable. There was no denying the pain in her eyes, but also the clear recognition of what she had done. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice even. She took a breath, clearly unsure of how to start. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice shaky. "Yeah, small town," I replied, feeling strangely detached. "Guess we run into each other sometimes." There was a pause, and she seemed to be searching for the right words. "I've been thinking about you," she said quietly. "About us." The words hung in the air, but I didn't feel anything. I had already let go. "I've missed you," she continued, her voice cracking a little. "I regret everything. What I did to you. I want to fix it." I felt the old temptation to hear her out, to ask her why, to ask how. But then I remembered. I had spent months trying to make sense of her actions. There were no answers anymore. "I'm glad you're doing okay," I said, my tone steady. "But I've moved on. I don't think we'll ever be what we were." Her face fell, and I saw the regret flash in her eyes, but there was nothing left for me to say. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted you to know." I nodded, keeping my emotions in check. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, before turning to walk out. As I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt the finality of it all. The conversation wasn't about closure for me. It was about letting go. The days that followed felt strangely lighter. The weight of that encounter had lifted something inside me, though I wasn't sure what. I had walked away. For the first time, I wasn't trapped in the past or consumed by the bitterness of betrayal. I had faced her, listened to her words, and said my piece. And now, I was finally free to move forward. I threw myself into the routines I had built, focusing on work, training at the gym, and spending time with the new people I'd met over the last few months. I was starting to feel like I was living my life again, instead of existing in the aftermath of her decisions. But still, there were days, mostly evenings, when I would sit in the quiet of my apartment, alone with my thoughts. I'd think about what could have been, about the life I had built with her, and how quickly it had all come crashing down. The anger had faded, but a small part of me still wondered if there would ever be peace. Could I ever truly forgive her? I stopped going to the coffee shop as often. The thought of running into her again gnawed at me. Even though I knew I was over her, I didn't want to reopen that chapter. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. A few weeks later, I was at the gym when I saw her again. This time, it wasn't a chance meeting. She was walking toward me, hesitant but determined. I could feel the weight of her presence before she even spoke. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft, the same vulnerability in her eyes. I hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Sure." But this time, no apologies. She gave a small, almost sad smile. "No apologies. I wanted to ask how you're doing." I took a deep breath. "I'm doing fine. I'm moving forward. I'm letting go." Her eyes glistened, and for a moment, I saw that familiar pain flash across her face. "I see that. I really do. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." I shrugged, unsure of what else to say. "I'm okay. I'm healing. I've learned to live without the weight of it all. And honestly, I think I'm better for it." She nodded, absorbing the words. "I'm glad to hear that. I hope you find happiness." "I really do." I didn't know what to say to that. I wasn't angry anymore, not at her anyway. I wasn't angry at myself either. I was just indifferent. We had both moved on, even if it had taken different paths. "I'm sure I will," I said quietly. "You too." And with that, I walked away, feeling a weight I hadn't realized was still there, lift from my shoulders. It wasn't until that moment, walking away from her again, that I realized something crucial. I was done looking back. The past, the betrayal, the anger, they no longer had a hold on me. For months, I had fought to heal, to move on, but that brief exchange, that final conversation, was the last piece of the puzzle I needed. I didn't need her apology anymore. I didn't need her validation. I didn't need to chase closure. The truth was, I had already found it on my own. I had already forgiven myself. The days after that encounter felt like a reset. I dove into the things I had neglected during my time spent in the shadows of my broken marriage. I rediscovered hobbies I had put aside, spent more time with friends who supported me, and even traveled to places I had always wanted to visit but never did. I was reconnecting with the person I had forgotten I was, the one who had dreams, ambitions, and a future that didn't involve her. And then, just as I was starting to feel comfortable in my own skin again, I realized something else. I was ready to love again. It wasn't that I had forgotten what happened with her, but I had finally healed enough to know that my worth wasn't tied to her betrayal. The scars were there, but they were fading. And it dawned on me that I could love without fear of being hurt again. Not right away, but when the time was right, I could open my heart. I met someone a few months later, someone I wasn't expecting. Her name was Mia. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party. She was funny, kind, and easy to talk to. There was no rush, no pressure. We just enjoyed each other's company. I wasn't looking for love, but somehow, it found me. With Mia, I didn't feel like I had to explain my past. She didn't judge me for the things I'd been through. She respected my boundaries and allowed me to go at my own pace. Slowly, I started to trust again. And that, in itself, was a victory. The journey hadn't been easy. It was messy, painful, and full of self-doubt. But here I was, standing on the other side of it, stronger and more aware of who I was than I had ever been. I wasn't the man I had been when I first found out about her affair. I was better. I was whole again. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. I was in control. Life has a funny way of teaching you lessons when you least expect it. Sometimes, it's the hardest experiences that shape you the most. And, after everything I'd been through, betrayal, loss, and all the pain, I had learned something important. I was enough. I had spent so much of my life trying to be the perfect partner, trying to fix things, trying to earn her love, only to find that all along, I needed to learn to love and care for myself first. I didn't need anyone to validate me. I didn't need to be defined by the mistakes of my past. Over the next few months, things continued to change. Mia and I grew closer, but it was different than anything I'd experienced before. There was no rush, no pressure. We were simply two people who appreciated each other, flaws and all. And somewhere along the way, I realized I had never felt more at peace. With her, with myself, with life. Then, one evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset, Mia asked me a question. "Do you ever think about her? About the past?" I took a deep breath, thinking for a moment. It wasn't a question I expected, but it was one I had been avoiding. I glanced at Mia, her eyes soft and patient, waiting for my answer. I had nothing to hide anymore, so I spoke the truth. I do think about it sometimes, I said, my voice steady. But not in the way I used to. I've come to terms with everything that happened. The betrayal, the hurt, it doesn't have power over me anymore. It was part of my journey, but it doesn't define who I am now. And I'm okay with that. Mia nodded, smiling softly. I'm proud of you. You've come so far. I smiled back, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't realized I'd been missing. This was my life now. And for the first time, I could truly say I was happy. In the quiet that followed, I realized how far I had come. From the man who had been blindsided by betrayal to the person I was now. Stronger, wiser, and more sure of himself than ever. I had found my peace. And as I looked out at the horizon, I knew there was still so much more to discover. The past had been painful, but it had led me here, to a place where I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The future was mine,